Thank you, Sharon, for coming down to the Center for Entrepreneurship in Gokhale Institute. We have the Executive Director at LEAD at Kriya University. So just to start things off, would love to know about LEAD and the work you do there. Just to set some context, can you talk a little bit about that?
Great, thanks, Pranya. Thanks for inviting me. Pleasure always. And always a pleasure to discuss the work we do and meet like kindred spirits. I'm looking forward as well to understand more your work. So LEAD is an action-oriented research organization. We started probably 15 years ago, where the core of it was incubated by, I guess, bankers and entrepreneurs wanting to make a difference in society. And at the time also, it was acknowledged that there is no deep research in some areas at the level of academics abroad, whether in Europe or North America. So the idea was it incubated as well in this Institute for Financial Management. So it was a small center where they decided to figure out who are the movers and shakers in the domain that could help understand how to do things in different ways. So it was very forward-thinking atmosphere 15 years ago. And to this day, I feel that it had the right set of spark. When you say spark, that can almost over a lifetime that you can see people, wonderful people who imagine, and things that 15 years ago that they mentioned about doing research in an area like business, entrepreneurship, banking. Yeah. Those ideas were very novel. Even the ideal of, looking at why would one have to look in entrepreneurship? Isn't the market supposed to solve it? Why one has to, look into banking, bankers, markets should solve it, no? But the recognition, and I guess these are people, business people, but with best interest in ensuring what can we do for society in return, that, business cannot survive without people in society. So how can we make it more equitable? Okay. But as well ensuring that markets work. So 15 years ago, I think Nachiket Moore had brought this ideal of, hey, I'm going to find the movers and shakers and people to come and willing to invest time in India to understand problems and as well help them, groom people to think about problems in India in a way that is meaningful. So I think I will not talk about the academic leader because I'm not an academician, but I do think that there is a requirement to address issues maybe at a higher level than was currently done. So that was 15 years ago. So, and the ideal was we've already remained true to our agenda. We had a few transitions, but our 4 core areas are always within the spirit of trying to evolve with the agenda of India. So we have an area called small growing business and employment. We have an area called financial well-being and social protection, health systems and quality of life, and institutional society. Our 2 core areas are really interconnected when you talk about small growing business and employment. Those are deeply linked together. I think the understanding of so the core of the understanding is how can people make, a living wage in India? How can they, and given the current circumstances like the jobless growth, I think without being an expert in India's industrial area, where certainly everyone knows it's not grown as a normal pattern where services market, say. So how do we understand the problems of identifying businesses that can grow and contribute to the growth, but also acknowledging what are the current situation in India. Just to a caveat, all of the work at LEAD is regarding people who are either vulnerable or marginalized. So vulnerable, what I mean is it could even be emerging middle income that is in danger of falling back into poverty, because it doesn't have the resilience mechanism, 2 bad months, they fall back into poverty. Right. All well to the very poor. And how to address those are very different. And the term small growing business employment also refers to the whole spectrum of people in that. And their circumstances are very different. And I think given even the mere fact of the heterogeneity in India, you have several decades in countries in one. It's not an easy task to do. Right. So that whole vertical tries to unpack the problem from different perspectives, but it still remains one of the grand challenges that the center tries to address in terms of how do we create sustainable businesses that are able to give a living wage, create employment, and be able to trickle down to help solve poverty problem and ensure resilience for India. Core to that as well, one cannot have a business without finance. So there comes the bankers that incubate us. And Mr. Vagul is a dear person that really helped with all of his background to understand. And at the time, Nachiket Moore even coining these terms that are relevant to the financial inclusion agenda. So how do you also ensure that money comes to them? So it used to be a term called financial inclusion. Now it got to financial well-being and social protection, because we understood it has to go hand in hand. Why financial well-being? It could have been the term before. The first question was, oh, these people are excluded, let's include them. But it's not just a matter of including them, and that's what we're noticing now. It's a lot of systems, the supply actually has been worked on. And that's why when I say we evolve with the term of India, to say like maybe people have access, but that was just a starting point. If they have access but no usage of things like that, or if they have access but they don't have the capacity to understand how to use this optimally, if you have even small businesses that have access to finance, but don't have the financial literacy required to build wealth from that, right, I would say our work is not done yet. And we're very far from that. So, and then you have this other work called health systems and quality of life. So it seems bizarre to see like, why would we look at that? But this came maybe a few years ago when we thought, okay, these are our core areas, and our core grand challenge remains the same as well, like I discussed. But everything is interconnected in India, and there's many things that need to be fixed. No, you need a whole ecosystem to survive. It's beyond a business plan. So how people live their lives in different contexts matters a lot. So one area that we notice is that people fall into debt and things like that, cannot, grow their businesses or go on with their life or invest in their families, often because of a health adverse event. Correct. So then we thought, okay, there's two things. So there's many problems in India. There is infant mortality and things like that. That's huge problems. The problems we were very interested in, that's why we called it health systems and quality of life, are problems that incur because people are not well integrated in the health system, don't have access to health. And you often see, I would say, people with NCDs, for example. A man who's head of a household suddenly has a heart attack. You suddenly has a level of diabetes that is not functional, had an accident because there's no safety measures in a small business. So that family falls back into poverty. The head of the household, is not able to provide. And you also see, and because the health system, and there are many reasons, health is not available, they're not aware, there are no preventive measures, there's just like other, many a roster of things. Yeah. The other aspect as well is that you often see like India is emerging, and we see, even I noticed in Chennai, more and more bikes and people have that. So imagine someone's just emerging out of poverty, this lower middle income, this young fellow buys a motorbike, bam, gets on an accident on the road, no helmet, all those circumstances, has a brain injury, there's no hospital close by. Yeah. The fellow is not able to get, or even the wife, whoever's on that bike, not able to get the care because they have to fill in an insurance form before doing anything. I remember as well being sick and saying, why do I have to fill a form before that? So these are all, I think, frictions in the system. There are frictions and structural problems to address. So we thought that let's address that at the same time. So our ideal is to the segment of population that would be more into like growing businesses and self-employment, things like that. They also need health systems, things like that. And institutions and societies, I think that we need to look as a whole, as an organization, I guess as a country in the world as well, issues like environment, climate change, because they're coming. Whether it's natural occurrence or not, this is not our goal. We are not environmentalists, but we need to adapt to say, okay, well, there are places where the weather is becoming warmer. There are places where there are people with shops in the afternoon, not able to make money because it's too hot. You see what I mean? Yeah. So how do we, and there are also places that have become cold and they're not able to grow their stuff, whether it's mushrooms or whatever, because the temperature change. How do we mitigate resilience? How do we integrate that into helping the business system? So our four verticals are very interconnected, but our grand challenge remains looking at this small growing business. At the time, we didn't coin entrepreneurs. It's part of our agenda, but we wanted to not put growing business, but small only because we wanted to differentiate between things that are not regularly taken by the market
Right.
but are at the intersections of many problems, and that address our segment like vulnerable to marginalized. And our last segment, Rana, is that you can't do this without data. So we understood very quickly that, especially the private sector, you don't have too much data because it's no banker will give you data on that.
Right.
So, and as well, business people have a very different way of sharing data and things like that. So we have a cross-cutting thing called it's capturing data and analytics. It's called DKI.
Okay.
And how do we collect information on small businesses? How do we do pulse assessment to understand? How do we even design research, taking, private sector, the way they function in mind? Say, for example, randomized control trial work very well for government programs because there's no competitor. There's one government program and you can run it. You cannot randomize alone because money is fungible. So what are the design and ways of doing research to do that? So that is integrated, and that's adaptive learning and learning by doing. Now I come back to my first point. So we initially 15 years ago, we had academics from abroad work with that. Myself and a few of my colleagues worked with some brilliant people. One of my mentors is a professor, Antoinette Shore. She was at MIT.
Okay.
I learned so much from her, even like how money there is things. And at some point, I think a lot of these research, once people do projects and people in it are exposed, there's a transfusion of knowledge, a transfer of knowledge actually. To see, and now I have a lot of my team able to do this by themselves, and we learn a lot. We still work with academics abroad, but by and large, it is of a collaborative nature. And I even make sure that even the field team is involved in the project because they're the eyes on the ground. I would say actually they tell us when the project goes wrong. Say if there's a research design regarding anything, even sometimes people try to figure out ways to, novel loan projects and things like that. My team would say, no, they'll be cheating this because of X, Y, Z. So it's good to get those inputs because very naively, sometimes we try to remove ourselves from the ivory tower. It's very nice on paper. But when you come here, it's best to discuss with people their mindset because I feel that poverty doesn't equate with stupidity. People are extremely clever. We need to understand their daily trade-offs. And I don't think we have a good understanding of that yet. So I'll stop there. That was a very long discussion.
No, that was great, actually.
What we do.
No, that sets the context really well. The interconnectedness. I think that's really, really relevant. And I love the way that you've thought through it because, essentially everything affects somebody's livelihood, right? Right from education, healthcare, sustainable development, all of that finally all comes together, right? And I'm going to take it back to your first main agenda, which is the small business and growing them, and ask you a question on that. You said you didn't call it nano entrepreneurs at that point in time. Just want to understand your thoughts in terms of how you would define nano entrepreneurs now, having worked for so many years in small businesses. In your mind, who is a nano entrepreneur?
So that's not an easy question. I would say a nano entrepreneur is by and large what is defined as, and maybe you will disagree, I didn't have time to really articulate that. But when you see the bulk of the country, probably less than 10 lakh turnover, often people have this debate, less than 1 crore turnover. And when we did research, we had problems finding people on that segment, just because of the segment that we look into. I'm not saying they're not there. Maybe it's 50 lakhs or below, but it's definitely below 1 crore. For sure. With the bulk being around maybe 10, 20 lakhs of turnover or something like that. I wouldn't put a view on formal and informal because it's a spectrum. So that, and maybe I would also say, I would add a tinge of maybe the type of business, but I've not finished my thought process on that. Because there are very traditional businesses that are hyper-local. So whether that enters into the definition, people cater, in a lot of these business in rural areas, they cater hand to mouth and they have the local resources and they cater kind of like things like that. Is that a definition that we have to add to? I'm not sure. Kind of thing. So I think what I think we should qualify is that gray area where it's not really falling into the MSME category. And whether it's a category in itself alone, I would also characterize it that it's highly dependent on as well the household dynamics. Because a lot of these small businesses and non-entrepreneurs, the people are the CEO of the business, but the CEO of the family as well. And I think one of the things that we discuss a lot in our research, and people think it's a flaw, but a lot of family members work in the business. So, and people say, oh, they don't have real employees. And when you start talking about that, well, it could be true that they might not bring on board a real employee, but a matter of trust is quite critical. So who do they trust the most for their business? Which will be their family members, no? Which is natural, because you don't have the rule of law in India that's very strong.
Correct.
If someone steals money with you, etc., what do you do? People are retrieved. So I think without defining it, there needs to be a strong element of trust. It could be a lot of family members are still working on it. But I think having a definition, because of the heterogeneity, it could be a combination of things that defines nano-entrepreneurship. But my thoughts are very not defined. I'm looking forward to talk to you more on this if we do a position paper.
Absolutely.
Because I'm just at the fact of what characterize these people. How can we sort them out? Things like, lower turnover, seasonality in employees.
Correct.
A lot of employees are family members. A lot of things are hyper-local, things like that. And maybe there could be other terms as well, or type of business and things like that. So it's a matter, but it's an interesting problem to define and solve. But I think it's a must to clarify, because that definition will depend on the type of support they get, the type of funding they get, maybe even, and it'll provide clarity to bankers as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, thanks for that. So one of the things that comes out also is data. Every time we talk about nano entrepreneurs, we get questions saying, oh, but we don't know anything about them. We don't have data about them, right? And the question in my mind always is, okay, what data do you have about MSMEs that you are saying that you don't have data about nano entrepreneurs, right? So have you seen, or do you have some thoughts around what is the data that they're looking for that perhaps they're getting in the case of formal registered businesses that perhaps nano enterprises is not providing that kind of data to them?
Yeah, I think so. And you're probably asking the question from a banker giving a loan?
It could be other places as well.
Okay.
Banker loan is the best use case for that, but even for markets, right, to get access to markets, the marketplaces will ask for certain data, right, in order to onboard people.
I'll define two things then.
Sure.
So I'll define it as the banker. So I think what happens is bankers are also trying to optimize their thing.
Yeah.
I do think that they probably have a certain set of industries that they know really well, and their agents are trained for that. Whatever falls out of the realm of that, people don't know. They just don't know. I would say we've not touched into women entrepreneurship, but I would say women enterprises are a bit different. And they're not, and there's less women entrepreneurs. So the fact that the bank doesn't necessarily understand fully their business, like they probably not understand a piece rate business compared to something else.
Okay.
This is just like initial thoughts and things like that. So there's two things about the definition of the type of business, but I do think that NBFCs have catered to that, because if you see NBFCs, they don't analyze the individual, they analyze the industry. So I won't name some, but I know for a few that they take like maybe 5 areas where they look at transport a lot. They say, okay, we're able to, people who have business with transport, and we understand the seasonality, we understand the supply of funds, we understand the outputs, we understand the product. Some people also look at funding, I know, kirana shops, and they're under, so they try to not evaluate the individual, evaluate the business. Okay. But I'm not a banker, but what I've seen from the banking industry, they look at a portfolio in aggregate. Okay. In a sense. Okay. So then that solves the problem, because NBFC is trying to cater to that. I'm not saying they're doing it brilliantly, but it's just saying that the goal is that understanding the business instead of the individual, because there are many of them and it's very heterogeneous. Okay. So unless someone's has a machine learning computer in their head, how do you? And it's a case where everybody's wrong and right at the same time. That's what I've noticed as well when you talk about things. The other use case on the market. So the issue, see, when you say about going online and things like that, there's so much research on trying to put people on ONDC, on understanding marketing. There's very little research on e-consumers. Who consumes that? Right. So if you're going to look, that's an area where I think it deserves to and I've talked to like people like Mishu and things like that, that they have a good sense. Like they know that, people will spend maximum 500 rupees. So then the people who come on board, like with crafts, with specialized, they already know you're not. So, but I do think that there is a market for e-consumers. We need to understand that as well. Okay. And you need to have a buyer as well. So it's not just marketing and things like that. So that's another case that we need to understand, because maybe even ourselves were like, you need to improve market linkage. What does that mean?
What does that mean?
So ONDC is a wonderful thing, I would say. Like, I don't work for ONDC, I'm not paid, but it seems to be one of these transformative things that it'll take time to use properly. Even UPI, I remember the first days of UPIs, it took forever to even have one person do a digital transaction, only because the consumer was not doing it. So when we had this Jaipur lab, this merchant, through a project called Catalyst, and we were looking at merchants and we're saying, the initial QR code, even before UPI, said it was Bharat Pay and all of this stuff. And then they said, well, we'll do it if our customers ask for it and things like that. So I think we need to understand that who buys online, what do people buy online, what you produce, can it be online? No. And if it's online, do you have the capacity to cater to your customer? Like, if you don't make if you make a tailored product, you might just do very local marketing where a tailor can work with individuals. You can't make something, because these small businesses would not be able to absorb grievances, return packages, all of these things. Even like you're in a rural area, you can be marketed. How do you transport things to the post office, things like that? So that whole ecosystem needs to be, I guess, better understood in a way. Yeah.
No, that's great. So, so that brings us to, going online, sort of triggers the question around digitization. Right?
Yeah.
And of course, we feel that digitization will really help these small businesses. Is that really true? Is the first question. And second is, we've seen that they're not willing to pay for any digital kind of enablers, right? So even a commission that goes from an e-commerce platform, for example, that's not very comfortable for them. Or even buying any software or buying any app. That's going to help them in the long run, but that willingness to pay is very, very less, is what we found. So what do you feel about the whole digitization? Is that a must? And what about the willingness to pay?
Okay. There's two things.
Two things, yeah.
So the willing, I do think digital offers tremendous opportunity. I do think, but it has to be, and probably risk as well. And even I'm very into, like, I love thinking about like AI, machine learning. These are very futuristic, but I think they could really help leapfrog a lot of the things we're doing in India. There's not without risks, but you need to diagnose the risk, manage the risk. We also know that it's always a step point until you get a lot of impact. So there's like child area. It's a very adaptive. There's no silver bullet, even if it has promise. We need to understand the potential of that as well. What was your second question as well?
The willingness to pay.
The willingness to pay. Okay, great. So the willingness to pay. So what I've been discussing with people with all these apps and things like that, it's a data business. So people are paying for an app, but you get massive amount of data that they resell.
Yeah.
That's what I was discussing. We're at IT Research Park, and I discussed the very initial days, and I understood. They said this is an app, but people are not necessarily in the app business. They're in the data that it generates. So I think there are ways to do models that are win-win.
Okay.
If things are transferred to the customer, I'm not enough an expert in that domain. But if people are price sensitive and things like that, that could be. I've seen that. Actually, that's why UPI took off before the other one, because the experiments we were doing in Jaipur, that 2% amount, nothing was taking off. They didn't want to do that, etc.
Yeah.
And then only, I think we had some agreements to take off that 2% or subsidize it through our own grant money just to see. And it was working better.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think there's ways, and it's just initial phases kind of thing. Because people also don't realize that you pay for bank service fees. The only thing is that they just deduct it in your bank account.
Correct.
So there's a couple of things: lack of awareness, lack of understanding all of these pricing models. Myself as well, I would not pay more than what is required as well. And there's some unpleasant things, because even at where I'm not poor, nobody's poor here, but at our level, sometimes you get onto these things that, it costs like 1,000 rupees a year, not so bad, and suddenly the price tripled like long back. So there needs to be a little bit understanding on that. Is it the pricing or the unpredictability of things? So that's an area where I'm glad you put it up. But I do think that there needs to be a lot of thought in these correct pricing for digital market, usage of it, and like mode of functioning as well.
Right.
I do feel that the quick thing of just passing on the funds to the consumers, especially low to middle income, they're extremely price sensitive. That's not a way to get them on digital. Because even like I manage people in India and I have staff at very low income. And someone who earns maybe 15,000 rupees a month, they're willing to change jobs just for 500 rupees extra for somewhere else.
Right.
You see what I mean? So that is a lot to do. And I understand that because they're very price sensitive.
Yeah.
So it's not only the 2%, it's when, why, and for whom.
True.
You see what I mean?
Yeah.
And India has all these weird situations where people are very clever. So if you figure out things like, oh, below a certain income, you don't pay 2%, everyone's going to be poor. Yes, right? So then there needs to figure out kind of thing. But I think there's ways to go about it. Like the real money is not in that 2%. Like I was, after understanding a little bit more, I'm still trying also to navigate that. It's about the data that it gets into kind of thing. I think that's the thing that has to be unpacked as well. You're asking a lot of very interesting but challenging questions. I have no real answer to it. I'm just stirring around the pot about some ideas. I hope it's sufficient.
No, absolutely. You know, in your opinion, your perspective. So
okay,
there's nothing wrong in anything you say. So you spoke about something very interesting right now. You know, so about what we call as the Indian jugaad. If you can stay, below. If there's something that you can do differently and work it to your benefit, you do it, right? So that brings me to the question of growth. Right? Many small businesses remain small because it's easier to remain small. Right? But we want them to grow. Right? And that's how a lot of other things are going to happen, including jobs. So where do you see the bottlenecks of growth? Right, for these small businesses, right? One is, of course, the mindset that, hey, if I'm small, then I'm outside, I'm under the radar of, other systems and things like that. But beyond that, right, what really is required, the top 3 things, if I were to ask you, that are required to catalyze and accelerate the growth of these small businesses, what would those be?
Identification. Okay. So it's because there's millions of these small businesses, Some of them are gonna grow. You see some stories. I've seen some stories, whether in Chennai, whether it's this Murugan Idli shop was a small shop, Nali shop was, so they were small non-entrepreneurs. So it's understanding that direct. So I think we don't understand how to identify them well. And because the vast amount of them are very similar in nature, but externally, but not implicitly. So you don't understand, their potential, their dynamics, things like that. The second thing is, I think you need a lot of capacity building as well, because it takes a different mindset to think on the long term. That, unfortunately, it goes as well with level of education, because I don't know if you read The Quest for Jobs from Anant Nageshwaran and his colleague. So all of the people who successfully started restaurant, they had a little bit of education higher. But they had like formal education. But I also believe, and I've been talking to people as well, there's other ways to gain knowledge than just formal education. So is that gap, could it be addressed in a different way for these entrepreneurs to get that same level of formal education? Do you really need a Harvard MBA to do something? Is there an element of that can do educated? The difference between street smart and knowledge. You can't just have street smarts, but you can't just have knowledge in a way. So there might be a little bit of way to that, like that capacity building that's very clear. And I remember talking to you, and what I really love, at some point you said they need bite-sized information just in time and where they're at. That, I think, that helps them to function in their daily affairs, because they're daily. There might be a way to nudge them on the bigger picture. And the problem is why they remain small as well. Again, it's like maybe a third point is, they probably don't see the bigger picture, because it's so hard. They're very comfortable. And there's a lot of stickiness to I can do this, I can do that, I have enough, etc. So, and it's not comfortable given a lot of factors. If you want to formalize, like me, like employees and things, it's a big headache actually. So I think one thing could be to understand a little bit more in depth. The small portion that you identify, whether they do it by themselves or identify those that can do it and they need capacity building. And then other than that, those who do point 1 and 2, third is how can you facilitate the regulatory bottlenecks? Because it's hard enough to run a business. Imagine all of these legal things that are on top of it, I think.
Right.
I do think digital can help a lot on that front, just being able to put your documents online. I do see a lot of the agenda of Digital India making things simpler. I talk from my own perspective. I don't even need to go to FRO to renew my visa, or even drivers. Everyone does it online. Are there not processes for businesses? So I guess those three, I don't know if it answers your three questions. I would do it that way. Yeah.
This is perfect. So
Yeah.
just as a related question to that, I read in some of your research, you term an enterprise as a gazelle, right?
Yeah.
An enterprise that has growth potential,
Yeah.
right? How does one go to identify, how do you identify a gazelle enterprise?
Well, the term gazelle is not mine. It's something that I learned from my mentor, Antoinette at MIT. And I think that's also part of the term in MBA terms. So that's not my term, but I thought it's appropriate.
Okay.
I think it's very difficult to identify. I don't think we understand enough. I think, first of all, there's no clear questions. It's not about, I think it's probably a combination of the sheer, I guess, product you have, circumstances, and the ability of the entrepreneur to go the mile.
Okay.
So you can't measure entrepreneurs like ambition or trust, because you hear all of these stories that, people don't look like they have it in them to be entrepreneur, and they are there for the long run. The gazelles, like, okay, they really took a strong, like, for example, Mr. Chaudhary, who started Jaipur Rugs. One would meet that man and you say a story. I think he was ridiculous just running a bike in Jaipur with rugs. You see what I mean? But the way patiently running the long run, understanding many things, and having the sheer willingness to go the mile. But how do you measure that? How you identify that? That's difficult. That's you would want to identify several unicorns like that and things like that. So I don't have a correct answer for gazelle, but I think it's critical. It goes with the identification. I don't think every business you can have success and you have mega success. So I guess gazelles are more like unicorns in a sense, but not quite. You don't have to have $1 billion and things like that.
Yeah.
And then you have successful business. So it's all part of, I guess, understanding how to better identify. Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah. So I'll come to my last question. I think I'm asking too much as well.
No, I hope it's okay.
No, so I'm really interested to know, women and women entrepreneurs. That's really close to my heart. We require a lot more women-led businesses, right? So what my question is, what are the unique, distinct challenges of women-led enterprises versus the, all the other enterprises, and how can we solve for them?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's a problem for women in terms of the structure of problems. Women take care of the families, social norms, patriarchal, etc. I think those are something that we work, collaboratively with our colleagues, even at IVH, that gender center, to understand that part integrated. I think for women as well, I think what is required is we need to understand the type of businesses they work with. If you look at even a lot of the government data sets, they're in businesses that are very different than men. So how do you support those industries?
Okay.
They're also very different. So we have very outdated data on NSSO. I think the last one is 2016.
Yeah.
But one thing that's characterized, women are mostly at home. It's home-based business. So they're invisible. They're not on the street.
Yeah.
So that's why we need to educate bankers as well to say, how does one evaluate home-based business? They don't have a fixed shop. They don't have inventory. Maybe digital, I think, would be probably beneficial for them because they can create digital trails, but that also is a matter of educating them and things like that. And they tend to be clustered or given opportunities only in very few sectors, like whether it's craft, piece rate, tailoring. I think when you talk about an SDC, I think you need to, especially I think digital is, you need to create a much better knowledge economy as well. So for example, in rural areas, given digital, can you not have I was thinking of this idea before I had proposed, these small businesses don't have funds to hire an accountant. Can you not train women in rural areas to be their accountant, specifically for even nano-enterprise or small businesses? So I think it's the ideal of how we think of other opportunities, like non-traditional. How do we increase the knowledge economy for women, etc.? And it's not bad to be in the craft sector as well. I think there's other opportunities.
Yeah.
But I would say that things that, and we're actually doing an credit audit study now to figure out, is there gender bias in loans and things like that? And we all know these things about documentation. So we're
Yeah.
sending women to get loans, and we're just documenting what they're being asked and things like that. We
Okay.
saw a few studies that there's not necessarily a gender bias, but there's a business bias, because these agents are not used to understanding the type of businesses women run, and B, women have less networks, and also they probably have less opportunity or awareness of how to write a business plan.
Okay.
So it's not that the business ideal is wrong. So we're hoping through this credit audit study to derive a few important things for women, for capacity building and things like that. But I do think it remains a key area, because if we don't integrate more women in businesses, or even on boards for that matter of fact, a lot of gender biases that are within in India as well are probably unconscious bias. You need things that make a decision that reflect society. So you need a diverse set of people, and that also includes 50% of women at least, or even we're integrating diversity of including tribals and people are disabled. That also ensures that whatever is created in society by society for society is reflected in it. And I think women play a huge role in that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for
my pleasure
for answering all these questions.
Yeah.
And there's so many things I still have to ask, so perhaps we do another podcast.
Perhaps I'll propose my colleague Preeti. She knows a lot as well. She's the quiet one in the back.
Yeah, so we do another podcast with Preeti.
But I'm happy to do
But,
anything. I'm more than
thank
happy.
you.
It's a topic that's very dear to my heart. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that. And I think there will be a lot of things to talk about as we sort of progress and work together on Nano Entrepreneurs. So thank you for being here, and thank you for being on the podcast. Thank you. Do send in your questions. We'll be happy to get the answers either from our own research or from Sharon and her team and others. Do subscribe if you want to know more about nano enterprises, unorganized enterprises, or entrepreneurship in general. Thank you.